everybody, welcome back. Thanks for bearing with us. My tech decides to work when it wants and not work when it doesn't want, but that's all right. We are here. We are ready to go. Let's see. Make sure my cameras are good. Everybody's still with us. Thanks for hanging out, guys. We really appreciate it. Tonight, we've got a good one for you. My guest tonight is a. Why is my camera white? My guest tonight is a fourth generation Asian American who was born in Los Angeles, California. Growing up as an athlete, he played collegiate football at Yale University while earning a BA and then went on to achieve a dual JD MBA degree. Soon after achieving his scholastic goals, he realized that he needed to switch careers and pursue his passion for the entertainment industry and especially as an actor. He got his first big break when he was cast in the TV series Beyond the Break. He began appearing in guest star roles on major hit series such as NCIS Los Angeles, Supergirl, Chicago PD. His determination and work ethic landed him a role in the blockbuster film Lone Survivor opposite Mark Wahlberg, as well as Salt alongside Angelina Jolie. He's also been seen performing stunts as a first-degree black belt in Taekwondo in G.I. Joe, Rise of the Cobra, the Green Hornet, Gamer, and Crank 2 High Voltage. Since then, you may have seen him in the Cinemax drama series Warrior, a television series inspired by the writings and work of Bruce Lee, or in the Paramount Network's Waco alongside Michael Shannon and Taylor Kitsch. He's appeared on season 4 of Amazon's critically acclaimed The Man in the High Castle. And well, needless to say, 2022 has been a big year for him as well because he's been cast in reoccurring roles on CBS's Magnum PI, Netflix partner Track, Apple's Hello Tomorrow. He will also be seen on FX The Old Man opposite Jeff Bridges on the streaming service Hulu. Everyone, woo, what an intro. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to tonight's guest, the amazing Rich Ting. Yay! Sorry, there's no applause button. I'm working on that.
All good. All good.
How
How's
you
it
doing,
going?
bud?
Great. Appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, no, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to come do this. I know by no means are we Good Morning America here, right? But we have a passionate, fun, loyal fan base and big fans of your work as well as all the work of these people that are putting entertainment out for the masses. So thank you so much for being a part of that. The first question right out of the gate, I always like to ask my guests, especially because we're so military connected and have a lot of veterans out in the community. Do you have a military connection, whether you served or a family member served or just really passionate about those who've served?
I don't have a direct affiliation or connection with the military services. However, I mean, growing up in California, also splitting my time in Hawaii near Pearl Harbor, and then obviously taking part in films such as Lone Survivor, I have the utmost respect for all branches of our military, for our men and women of our armed forces. So I'm just blessed to have had that exposure and to see the different branches and the different locations I've actually lived, worked in, and as well as represented. You know what I mean? By no means do I have the bravery or the skill level to be one of our armed forces, out there. So that's why I have the utmost respect and gratitude for our branches and allowing people like myself to have careers as actors in Hollywood.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, we appreciate it. Thank you for the support. That means a lot. Um, Man, there's so much. I was reading through your bio, looking at your IMDb page, and all. Really getting to learn the actor and the roles you've been given. First thing that jumped out to me is that you're unlike, let's say, the majority of actors. You're not a transplant to Los Angeles. You were born and raised there. Is that? Did, I'm sorry. I'm assuming, does that play a part into wanting to be an actor? Did you, because you grew up around that scene, or did you always have an interest in it? Like, how did that start?
Yeah, that's a great question because I didn't actually realize I was a minority, so to speak, until I got in the business because there aren't a lot of Los Angeles born and raised quote unquote actors or entertainers, which to me I discovered while doing it. I could honestly say, yeah, growing up in the LA area as a kid, the entertainment industry is everywhere, so it definitely has an impact on you, especially like my generation. I grew up in the '80s, so to see a lack of representation as far as especially Asian American leading men on television or in cinema, was always kind of a question mark, even at a young age. I grew up, when Michael Jackson was here, obviously, you know, uh, a lot of the Bruce Lee movies, which inspired me a lot, were still kind of making their way around the world at that point. And, it just, it was weird because people think, you know, do I have an advantage being born and raised in LA, in Hollywood, so to speak? And to be honest, it's such a fair level playing field. I mean, I always say I had to wait in line. I didn't have an agent. I didn't know how to get a manager. I really didn't even know how to get a headshot, to be honest. So a lot of these basic things I felt as foreign to my own hometown city as someone who moved across country. So, long story short, I felt the only advantage is I just knew where to go to eat. I knew where to go to hang out, but as far as that, work wise, there really wasn't an advantage, which is kind of ironic.
Yeah, yeah. You know the traffic. You
Exactly.
that part.
Yeah. I know how I'm going to get from A to B, but I don't necessarily know how I'm going to get cast or how I'm going to get an agency,
Right.
especially in the beginning.
I would imagine growing up in high school and all the like. Did you have a lot of your peers that were like, "Well, I'm gonna miss the prom because I'm doing audition season and like different things like that"? I mean, was that something?
You know what? No, and it's weird. I think Los Angeles, especially the wider LA area, which one thing about LA is that it's so spread out. So there are people that grow up in the West Side that literally will never travel 15 miles inland, like throughout their entire life, literally. People that live in downtown that won't go south, like to Orange County, which is like a 20-minute drive. So there are these little bubbles, that we kind of grow up in, and fortunately for me, I grew up earlier in LA and then moved to San Francisco for high school. So I kind of had like a northern Southern California kind of exposure, which really opened my eyes to how different California is, just a few hours away. And so, I really wasn't influenced by my peers. It was more like anyone else, where I'm a fan of TV, I'm a fan of film, and growing up, I had certain heroes that I just looked up to, and that's kind of where the bug started at a very young age. It wasn't, throughout my career, I've definitely been influenced by my peers that are literally left and right of me, right? But
Mhm.
as far as trying to get into the industry, there was no advantage there just because I really didn't know anyone that was doing it.
Yeah, and like we said in your intro, you know, professionally, you went to college. You played collegiate football, which I'm curious. What was the position? What'd you play?
I got recruited as a quarterback and as a free safety, and back then it was the Pac-10, and I really wanted to stay home, in California on the West Coast, and being 6'1", that's a short quarterback, for the Pac-10 at the time. This is when the 6'3", 6'4" guys. So I was recruited more on the defensive side to Stanford, some other Pac-10 schools. Luckily, I wanted to play quarterback still and fight for that position. So the Ivy Leagues gave me that opportunity to kind of stick with it, even though I literally I played slot, I played tail, I played defense, I was in special teams, I was trained as a quarterback. So they kind of used me as a quote unquote athlete once I got to Yale.
You were
I
the
just, again, you get there, you don't want to sit on the bench, so you kind of volunteer for wherever the team quote unquote needs you the most.
Yeah, you were the Swiss Army knife. You were the jack of all
Yeah,
trades.
literally utility. You know what I mean?
Mm,
So, but
very cool.
great experience. Football was definitely my first love, my first identity, and happy to have used all my eligibility up. So there's no regrets, and I can kind of leave that behind and move on to other things.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe down the line, there's a role of a football player. I don't know. Some of these guys get,
Yeah,
who knows what. You play a guy in his.
I mean, I try to stay in shape as best as I can. You know what I mean? And even though I haven't thrown a ball literally in a few years, muscle memory kicks in. So I'm always ready for that. That would
Yeah,
that would be epic.
yeah. You got to be ready for the opportunities. So you did finish school. How soon from, because you got the dual JD MBA.
Hmm.
How soon from finishing that did you realize, okay, the passion is there for acting, and I want to get into the business and I want to pursue that?
I would say the passion was always there, to be honest, ever since I was a kid. I mean, just growing up, like how you introed me with, I am fourth generation Asian American, which is, on the mainland of US, aside from Hawaii, it is unique in a sense where there aren't a lot of us. Let's say, a lot of my friends that were of Asian descent were a first generation, or 1.5 is what they called it. So that being said, my parents had a strong athletic background themselves, so they pushed us, my brothers and I, towards the sports more than the academics. But with that, the reason I bring that up is because there was no time for the arts when I was a kid. There was no time for me to play an instrument or learn an instrument. There was no time for me to participate in theater. But those opportunities you get as a kid, when you're forced to because of requirements, right? I definitely took those opportunities and actually fell in love being on stage. I fell in love, performing martial arts in front of a crowd. So, whether it was basketball, football, baseball, taekwondo tournaments, I was always used to being in front of an audience. So that bug. And then when I went to Yale, obviously the infamous Yale School of Drama is definitely contagious. I didn't major in theater, but I definitely exposed myself to that art when I was there, and going to plays and going to musicals and whatnot. It was always there, and it always kind of like was in the back of my head. And even, to be honest, it didn't become a reality until I got into grad school, where I literally had more time to train at acting studios, and train with coaches for fun. That was definitely the path, was to kind of pursue being a corporate attorney with the JD MBA dual degree. But now, without football and sports, I had a lot more time. So I started doing it as my yoga, as kind of like just an extracurricular to kind of just experiment with,
Mm.
and slowly, I started getting approached. I did a lot of modeling work in front of the still camera. I started doing some commercial work, and the universe is weird like that. It just kind of starts directing you, and the tunnel starts getting narrower, and the road just starts, you get all these intersections of different things, and it finally happened.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And guys, yeah, I already see questions coming in. Remember, if you have questions for Rich, throw them in the chats. We'll get to them as many as we can. So first, right out the gate from Tim Morgan, he says, "Your first big paycheck. What did you spoil yourself with?"
Wow. Wow. That, the word big is
Vague, right?
it's so vague, because, you go through these different points of your life where maybe $100 is like the biggest check, like, and that's a great question. Actually, no one's asked me that. I mean, like I said, $100 at one point was big. It was huge. You know what I mean? I
Well,
think it was probably something for my mom, to be honest. Like, that was kind of my thing. She's been my number one supporter, and I do remember getting her something, whenever and whatever that big check was for. You know what I mean?
right.
This business is so self-investing, where you have to, you gotta invest for headshots, for demo reels. You gotta, all the money's going out before it's coming in. So my first check, that I think that I can remember, definitely was for my mom. However, every other check after that was probably just to repay my own debt I had.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was, I definitely had to, I had definitely had to give thanks in some form of materialistic gift to my mom, just because she's been in my corner since day one.
Hey, that's awesome, man. That means you got raised right, looking to give back and say thank you. That's huge. Um, so I mean, you've moved into now the acting, and sorry, I'm doing this like chronologically in my head. So now
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you moved into the acting, and can you recall um the feeling that you booked that first thing, you got the role, and you're gonna play this character, and you're excited, um like what did that mean to you in that moment to get book that first thing?
Yeah, again, so many levels and platforms to this industry is what I like to, I segment it like that in my head, just so I can kind of track my progress and my growth as an artist in this hectic world that I work in. The first job, like you mentioned again in the intro, was I got booked, actually, when I was in law school and business school, for a recurring role on this show called Beyond the Break. And to be honest, when I booked that, because I wasn't pursuing the acting jobs as a full-time career, it was a fun. It was fun. It was like, hey, I got nothing to do this weekend. Why not? go see what it's like to film on, as a guest star on a TV show that happens to be filming in the same city as my law school and business school. So that was kind of a cool feeling. It's like, oh yeah, this is great. By no means at that point did I think I would be transitioning into this business full time. I think once I made that decision upon graduating law school and business school and actually taking a job back in LA at a law firm, which brought me back to LA. I think the first job that really was impactful was when I got cast for this Warner Brothers show called Ben 10 Race Against Time, which is based on a comic, which is based on a cartoon. And Warner Brothers decided to do a TV movie of it. And through connections and networking, they thought I'd be a perfect match for the character of Heat Blast. And that's actually the big step, was where I was like, wow, I have to commit. I have to be on set this many days. I have to do the prep and rehearsal and R&D for this many days. I can't be kind of double dipping in two jobs. So that's when I kind of left the legal industry, the corporate America world, and decided to go full in. And so that job was very monumental to me, just because it represented that transition, that jump from what I had been training on as an academic person to this artistic world that I'd only dreamed of entering. And I distinctly remember we were on the Warner Brothers lot doing rehearsal for this big fight scene, and it was right near the Back to the Future clock, right? And like literally, and then the tour buses are coming around with the tourists, and it was really surreal because I was on the clock working, yet I almost felt like I was a viewer, because I had taken these tours as a kid as well on these different studio lots, and now I'm on one. So I think it was pretty surreal, but at the same time, like, I wasn't I was so focused on the job, I didn't realize what was happening. But it was definitely a very, very monumental moment for me in my career, for
Yeah,
sure.
I can imagine surreal, almost like out of body, like you're doing the thing, but you're seeing
Yeah.
yourself do the thing.
I've I've had a couple of those experiences, to be honest, where like, just real quick, I'll give you another example. A lot later into my career, when I got cast for Amazon season 4, The Man in the High Castle. I had been a fan of that show from season 1, and I knew all the characters, I knew the storyline, and we actually auditioned for different characters for the first 3 seasons. But people that are familiar with that show realize that there's only one guy gets knocked off, there's only one replacement. And so it was kind of like we were just waiting for the right character to come up. But when we booked it, and then we actually shot it in Vancouver, when I got there and I met the cast, it was an out of body experience, because I know these characters because I was such a fan of the show. And that one's really special, just because of my connection with the show prior to actually being in it, and the fact that it's an alternate universe. It's not like you just go outside right now and you're like, oh yeah, we're shooting it. Like, we were transferred into this universe on set, with these amazing, like, CG effects and whatnot. And that was a very cool experience.
Oh, that's so cool. That's awesome. We do have more questions coming in. Although Captain Wayne, he has any tips on acting, but I feel like that's a bit vague. So, do you
I
have
mean,
general tips?
yeah, I mean, I remember one of the guys, one of my seniors that I looked up to entering the business and had a chance to work with him. The first thing he told me, he just said, are you in a class? And I said, 100%. And that's something that I highly recommend. You know, um, just get in a class, start working out. It's almost like it's the same question I get, which is like, hey, how do I get in shape? You know what I mean? It's like, get to a gym, get on that treadmill, start walking, just start walking, do some machines, get familiar with your environment. And so, I get that question a lot, actually, from people coming up, and youngsters in the game. And I put a lot of stress on that, because people, they think of that like as school. They go, I don't want to take an acting class, or I don't want to get into an acting studio. But then you shouldn't be doing this. You know what I mean? You need to get around your peers. You need to get on a stage. You need to feel what that feels like. You need to watch. I've learned so much more from watching my peers perform than actually performing myself. And the only way you experience that is in an actor studio. And it's great. It's contagious, because you're there because you want to be there, and everyone to your left and right is there for the same reason. So some people think, I don't want to go to class, man. Like, I'm tired of school, but it's a different type of study. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I definitely recommend just getting in a class.
Yeah, I mean it's so, I can imagine that yes, you're going to learn on the job, but you're going to maybe get booked for more things when you know what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, like anything else, you need a foundation. You know what I mean? And one thing I'll compare it to is like my martial arts background, right? Like I've been doing martial arts since the age of 4 years old. I've studied different forms. My foundation is in Taekwondo. That doesn't mean though I'm going to be able to transfer that skill in front of a camera with other stunt players and a stunt coordinator. It doesn't. They're completely separate entities. And so with the acting, it's the same approach, which is you need to have a foundation so that when you get on a set with a director, with a second unit, choreographer, you're able to be molded. You got to be able to be flexible, metaphorically, because a punch in real life is not going to sell like a punch on a camera. You know what I mean? The reason why we have these big action sequences and these huge fight scenes and these crazy, artistic martial art moves is because we fabricate it for camera. Anyone that's a real martial artist, is going to realize that doesn't happen in a real fight, right? But the majority of our audiences are not professional martial artists or MMA fighters or UFC guys, right? So we got to make it a little bit more dramatic. And the only way you can do that is if you have a foundation. It's as simple as instead of throwing a punch straight, we got to come wide. And in reality, you would never teach to come wide, as simple as that sounds, but on camera, it projects so much more. So, another great question I get from people coming up in the business is, you got to have that foundation, as an actor, as an artist, so that when you get on set and you get with other creatives, you're able to take their notes and make those adjustments.
No, I mean that's great. Yeah, I can imagine you talking about that makes me think of like, hey, I'm former army. I was an infantry guy. I shot a lot of guns, and you see
Mhm.
some of these movies that some of them do really great. Black Hawk Down and Lone Survivor. These are movies that really put a lot of effort into all that. But then you see other
Totally.
movies where you're like, oh my god, no trigger discipline. Oh my god, the patches are all
Yeah.
wrong. Oh my god, all these things.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
that, and that's the thing, and I bring that humbleness to a project like Lone Survivor, where I come into that set, and much respect to Peter Berg, our director, and Mark Wahlberg and the entire cast, because that set was filled with real military servicemen and women that were extras. So everyone on that base, everyone in those scenes were real, either current active or veterans. And that made me feel very small because I come in as an actor. That's it. I'm an actor to play a person who unfortunately lost their lives during that period. And so I'm honoring him. I'm also honoring, our US military. But at the end of the day, I am an actor, right? And so the last thing I want to do is represent what you guys do and have done for us in a incorrect way,
Right.
right? So even with that, I had to be the most flexible. I had to adjust, and I'm a perfectionist by nature. So, when I watch stuff and I don't believe it in areas that I'm more expertise in than others, let's say, it really bothers me as a viewer. So like what you said, whether it's just how you enter a building, how is your footwork. A lot of people, even though the camera may be here, your footwork is going to affect your body language and that chemistry with your other people in a line, let's say, right? And I may not have the right terminology, but I know the overall effect and what it's supposed to look like. So, coming on a set like Lone Survivor, I was taking notes the entire show. Like the entire few months I was working on that, I'm just listening to every service guy, story after story, and I was telling them, because a lot of times they try to keep us separated. They're like, don't bother the actors, and I frown on that a little bit, because I understand, we need our space to work and to get into character and whatnot, but there's a lot of what I say gold around me, which you may be to my right and looking at me and being like, oh, he's holding that wrong, and that's where I really welcomed everyone to coach me. I wanted to be coached,
Right.
I wanted to know the proper footwork. I wanted to know the proper hand placement. I want to know, literally, is it look first or aim for, whatever it is. and because at the end of the day, I did not want, and a lot of footage got cut as they always do in that final edit, but whatever was shown, I wanted it to be 100% believable to an individual like yourself.
Yeah.
I could care less, honestly. This may sound really bad, but I could care less about the non-military viewer that just wanted to see stuff get blown up, right?
Right.
Like you're gonna see that. I wanted the guy who's active, who's watching it on another part of the world, and be like, wow, this is the most accurate depiction, right? That of what we do, So I mean, and I take that mentality to everything I do, whether it's language, whether it's fighting, um, people that I love it because I'm in a recent show that I did called Warrior on HBO Max. My character is we developed him in the Hungar Gong Fu basis. So martial artists out there in the world are going to understand and know what that means. Yet it's Hollywood. So I'm going to throw some kicks and stuff that aren't necessarily in that form.
Right.
Right. And I got called out a lot in funny ways. Like, hey, dude, like you're not sticking to like that specific art. And I'm like, I know, but the director, the stunt choreographer, they want this, So, again, I want people to be able to laugh about it and enjoy it. But I really try to perfect my craft for those individuals out there that are experts. And I want to represent that expert level as best as I can.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I can hear in listening to you talk, I'm hearing a little bit of that utility guy, the guy that was, I want to be coached. I want to be on the field. I want to do what I
Yeah,
can and
100%,
make it better.
100%.
So it's so cool to see that it still, that translates and it still comes through, whether you're on the football field or,
Yeah,
on the combat mat doing some martial arts or, behind the camera. That's pretty awesome. Um,
totally.
and
And I love it. I love it when I get tech advisors, weapons guys that, have a background in the military, because there's an instant trust there. There's an instant sense of respect. Um, I remember in another show you mentioned, I played a sniper, an FBI HRT sniper in the show Waco. And I remember the gun we used wasn't the best gun to use technically, but aesthetically it was.
right.
And it was jamming some of the times. And I remember my tech advisor, who has a resume, that's crazy long, was just telling me, look, I think he said, you know, s- slow is smooth and smooth is fast,
Slow, smooth,
right?
smooth, fast. That's right.
And because when the camera's rolling, the adrenaline's pumping, and I got targets lining up, and they want to really sell it, right? It was jamming. He was like, dude, just take your time, and then he starts telling me, what he's done, and stuff like that really helps me as an actor, you know what I mean? Because it's so true, you know what I mean? There's a sense of calmness, there's an exhale, it's an intense situation, but guys that have done it for real, that they're able to control it,
Mm.
and that sense of control is what I really wanted to demonstrate. And maybe people picked it up on camera, maybe they didn't. It didn't matter. It's how I felt, and that's where I think the character comes alive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's authentic to who you want that character to be and
Totally.
resonate it out to the audience. Whether like you said, whether
Yes,
they pick it up or not. Um
exactly.
you've done okay, so there's one question from Jim. So Jim, I'm going to edit this a bit because his question is who would you never act with again? And I know in the business,
Oh
we you gotta I'll put it. Have you been in a situation where there's someone where you're like, I'd rather not work with you again?
I mean, I think it's pretty universal. I'm gonna have to, obviously take the PC route on
Of
this one,
course, of course.
but I mean, yeah, like the one thing, and I do get asked this question, or who have you worked with that you hate or whatever, you know what I mean? And here's the thing: we've all worked with people we hate. There's a lot of us right now that are working with people we can't stand, right? But we
Right.
do it because we're adults and we're mature, and the way I look at it is like this: being an actor is such an individual sport. And that's actually one of the reasons I hate this business, to be honest. Because, like you said, I've grown up always on a team. I've always had fellow teammates, and we all come together to strive for a common goal. Um, you would ideally think that's what happens on a show where you have a group of actors who are trying to bring something from paper to real life to show to millions around the world. the problem is all of us are individuals. You know, our training, our daily life prior to these shows that we book, you know, it's quite lonely. You know what I mean? And I'm just fortunate to have a team background and foundation that I've been raised with, so that when I do get on a set and I'm working with people, to me it's very exciting. You know, it's thrilling to now have to go to, and instead of waking up tomorrow, which I will wake up tomorrow because I'm not on the clock right now. I will wake up tomorrow and I will go through my daily regimen as I always do by myself. You know, so when I'm able to go to a studio or go to location and work with other people, whether they're difficult or not, I really try to find the silver lining in those situations. Because the reality is you're never going to work in an ideal situation. You know what I mean? You always have to be able to adjust, to accommodate, and at the end of the day, be professional. You know, and I think that's a big word right now. You know, for those that witnessed the
Mm,
Oscars the other day, right? And I
mm.
think you know, you always, you know, we're put on certain platforms, whether, like I said, there's always different levels to this game, right? We're all public figures to an extent. And I just, I just really try to emphasize the professionalism, you know, and that's universal, dude, with any job, you know what I mean? So, fortunately, to be honest, there hasn't been anyone that bad where I'm like, I do not want to work with them. There are people that I prefer not to, but it's not like going to determine whether I take a job or not. It'll
Right.
just kind of, you know, maybe I'll roll my eyes a little bit before, but you know, I'll show up for sure. You know, but again, you know, you just gotta, you know, that's, you know, it's just being professional.
Yeah, and I think if you for the everyman to equate it to like, hey, there's always someone in the office you don't like working with. There's always that person.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
there is.
and on a set, I mean, expand it out, right? Because there's dozens of actors, there's extras, there's writers, producers, like
Oh
all
yeah,
these people. So, I mean, it's rare that you're gonna be like, oh wow, everybody's a happy family and we all love each other. I
yeah.
mean,
I don't even think. I mean, I've been on some shows where you know, the joke is everything's too good to be true, right? But you know, there's just, I mean, we figure there's over like 200 people that are working on a single shot. I mean, I think if you do, if there's not one guy in or one girl in that 200 population, something is wrong. You know what I mean? There's got to be. You know what I mean? Someone's got to be having a bad day somewhere, right?
right.
So, um, but you know, like I said, I can only relate it to, you know, other jobs and other careers. You know, we all go through it. You know, it's all the same at the end of the day.
Right. From Kaz in the chats, I think this is funny. He says, "Is that a bobblehead of yourself next to the like, over your shoulder?"
Yeah, that guy right there. Actually, that's a bobblehead of my character of Bolo on HBO Max's Warrior. Um, but yeah, yeah, I got that. I got that a couple years ago. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. Is there any speaking of that, like, is there any collectibles that you've kept from a set, like a costume, a prop? Is there anything you've any mementos you've kept over the years?
Yeah, I actually, you know, I try to keep something, to be honest, from every show I do. It's just a question of whether uh, it's allowed or not. But yeah, like from Warrior, for example, you know, Shannon Lee, Bruce Lee's daughter, who was one of our EPs and a you know, very close friend of mine, she was able to gift me, as well as Jonathan Tropper, our showrunner. They were able to gift me and my actual weapon that I use, which is kind of like it's like a hatchet and it has like a spike at the end, and it
Right.
was actually molded to my hand and built for me. It was a very customized, very unique, particular piece to me. So that's why it meant a lot to me to keep that. And I was able to keep. I use a railroad spike in that show as well, and that was a very that was actually made for me upon my request to actually not show during our filming. It was just one of those things that I wanted to have on me to feed me as the character, and we ended up highlighting it in one of our episodes, and it became a big thing. But I was able to keep both of those, and you know, whether it's like, you know, a jacket or a hat or something,
Sure.
you know, usually the producers and the showrunners and the creatives are pretty generous, you know, as giving you a token of something that you can remember the show by. So yeah, I have my section in my closet where I keep all my stuff. So
Yeah, you got to display stuff, man. You got to like the wall
yeah, yeah,
of memorabilia. Um,
exactly.
what else? Oh, so I was reading up on you, and I read that you love to travel, and that you're a true foodie at heart. And
Yeah.
that struck me. With all the things that you do, where you're an athlete and a martial artist and an actor, foodie. Where does that play into it? The
Yeah. Um, that's a great question. I think it's a product of just being able to work and travel in this business. Growing up, I never really traveled. I grew up half the time in Hawaii, but like other than that, not even leaving the West Coast was a thing. We just kind of San Francisco to LA to Hawaii. That was kind of like the triangle. And being a collegiate athlete, summers weren't available to travel as well. And I couldn't study abroad and whatnot. So, upon booking these jobs, early in my career, going to like Southeast Asia, going to Vietnam, going to Thailand, then venturing north to like, Japan, China, Korea, then in South Africa where we filmed Warrior, and then I've done a ton of stuff in Canada as well. Um, I just started kind of exploring, and I would try something here, try something there, upon being disciplined with my diet, of course, and slowly I started really getting into it, as far as like desserts, for example. I never was a dessert guy, right? And all of a sudden, like I would go to these, I kind of hate that I went there because now I crave it, right? But I'd go to these like bakeries, throughout different parts of the world, and just this most simplest thing you eat, and you're like, oh my god, what is this? Like this is fantastic, and then you come back to LA and everyone thinks LA is, we have all these restaurants and bars and lounges and whatnot, but I would say there's more quantity than quality here, to be honest, if I'm going to be a critic, a food critic, so, that's another thing that motivates me because I get excited to go to these certain places just because, even New York, for example, I think New York is such a gold mine of just cuisine, just because of like the demographics that it attracts as opposed to LA, so that's where that foodie thing has come about. It's been kind of surprising, to be honest, because to me back in the day when I'm training, it's all bland foods, right? It's all, it's rice, it's chicken, it's
yeah,
vegetables, and I eat to live. I don't eat to enjoy, is what I always used to say. But now, I try to have a balanced deal where I still eat to survive, but I also eat to enjoy if I'm
yeah.
allowed those cheat days or whatnot.
You gotta
But
live a little, man. You gotta enjoy it.
yeah. So I mean, that's a sheer product of just my job, to be honest.
Nice. Oh, I like that. I like that. And I do have to touch on, because we're a pop culture show here, that you were on an episode of Supergirl, superhero
Yeah,
show, and you got to play Metallo, or another version of Metallo.
yeah.
I'm curious what that experience was like, because it was obviously a lot of prosthetics. I think you were like running around without a shirt for most of some part of it. I mean, what was the process like being on that show?
Well, first, that was such a great opportunity for me, just because having been familiar with with that DC world, I knew the traditional story of Corbin turning into Metallo and whatnot, and I knew he was traditionally depicted as a Caucasian male, whether he was from the UK or the US or whatever. And so when they called me to audition for that role, of course they told me, they said, hey, look, we want to introduce a new Metallo. And I was kind of confused because I was like, or is that in the archives, right? And I remember they auditioned. I think they hit on every ethnicity, to be honest. And so when I booked it, it was such a statement, I think, to for the creatives to be like, hey, let's turn an Asian American character into Metallo, you know? So in that sense, it was a huge win for me to represent that person and that character being the ethnicity and, the generation that I am. And then once I got up to Vancouver, I remember, yeah, there was a ton of prosthetics from the waist up just because of that chest plate. And that was fun because it was the first real. I've had a prosthetics done before, but just having a mold of half of my body and having to get in that, I took about 3 hours a day and about 2.5 hours to get out of every day. Unfortunately, we filmed it in the summer, so I'm just sitting there on set, it's just sweating, like brains out. But with all the electronics and the gadgets, I had guys, remotely controlling that thing, and I'm performing the whole deal. It was definitely like it took a team to do that, and it was just really cool experience. To obviously be around Supergirl and to fight Superman, and to have that big fight scene in the park. You know, and it was cool because actually the initial episode, which usually these episodes are only like 2 weeks of filming.
Right.
This one, I mean, I was filming for over 4 weeks for this one episodic, and that episode it was supposed to end with me getting my kryptonite heart pulled out after Superman defeats me in the park. And I remember we finished that, and I wrapped. I flew back to LA, and they called me the next week, and they said, "Hey, we need you back." And I said, "Why?" And they said, "Because we don't want to kill you off. We need you to wake up." And I was like, "Dope," So I went back, and we reset up a scene in which all they needed me to keep the storyline open, for hopefully more episodes or whatnot, was for me to kind of like wake up and kind of give like an exhale, like I'm still here,
Mm-hmm.
and that shot gets thrown in the so that episode is really strung out to like a lengthy shoot. I haven't got the call to go back, and I don't think they've had Metallo back since then. So, but the cool thing is that these are what these shows do. They always leave kind of like a door open,
Yeah.
so we can visit that storyline. So, but overall, just the fact that I was a part of the whole DC world, and it's weird because I was telling my wife this, afterwards. I was just like, man, like, as an actor, I train myself to do an episode and to leave it. It's just kind of, the mental health aspect of what we do. That's the healthiest way to do it.
Right.
And you're right. It's one episode, but the following for the DC comics is huge, especially with Supergirl, Superman, and whatnot. And man, I've been recognized like across the globe. Like I'll go into a restaurant. I went into a restaurant in Cape Town, South Africa. Okay, while we're shooting season 1 of Warrior, and this is years after I'd done this episode of Supergirl. And I remember like the entire restaurant, like of the workers, the host, the hostess. It was an open kitchen, so some of the chefs, were there. I could see through the waiters, the bus boys, everybody just was staring at me the whole night. And I was just like, I didn't think much of it. And at the end, when I paid the bill, service was excellent. And they all were like, "Can we get a photo with you?" And I was like, "Sure." And at this point I was like, "Oh, they probably know there's a new show filming,"
Right.
and they're like, and one of the guys was like, "Dude, we saw you walk in and we're like, Metallo just walked in," and this is in a random restaurant in South Africa in Cape Town. You know what I mean? And I actually was so shocked because I was like, "Oh my God, like you guys recognize me?" And they're like, "Oh my God, dude, this whole restaurant, like we're huge DC comic fans. Like we couldn't believe it," And so it's just amazing, the audience that those shows, touch to, and reach out to. I'm just really grateful that I was able to have a part in that whole universe, let's say.
Yeah, I feel bad because a lot of these shows get bad raps. Like, oh, this is lowest common denominator, show. It's not real art. It's not Bridgerton or whatever it is.
Yeah,
When
yeah,
like
yeah,
these guys are putting their hearts out there, and it's
yeah.
so loved by the fans. They embrace it
Yeah,
so
no,
heartily.
totally. Every show, every network, every channel, every studio, they have their own genre, they have their own following. That's one thing I've come to learn. And that's a prime example. Like I've been recognized. People call me out Metallo at these conventions before they'll call me out on as Bolo from Warrior, so to speak.
Right.
And it's really interesting. Because it just shows you that one episode could have so much impact on people, where I could do a whole season of something else and they're like, "Oh, I didn't watch that." You know what I mean?
Right.
So, and that's one of the reasons why I leave my work. I mean, I leave it, and if people identify me from my past work, that's awesome. But by no means do I walk around like, "Hey, I'm Metallo." You know what I mean? Like so that was then, and fortunate to be included in that season, and we kind of move on to the next thing. So
Yeah, and we do have another question in the chats, but before I want to ask that, I want to caveat on something you said because I know for a lot of veterans, things like PTSD, right? The trauma, the anxiety, depression, all these things play a role in after their service and whatnot. And I've talked to a lot of actors now, and mental health is such an important part of what you do because whether it be from diving into characters and having to kind of pull yourself back, or even just you pour your heart and soul into something, and then let's say like the critics hate it and it bombs or whatever it is. Doing something like you do as an actor, it opens you up to a lot of criticism from fans, from executives, from critics. How do you handle the weight of all that?
Everything you said is true. One thing I'd like to add to that list, which I think for me personally in my world is so, I would say, big, a big part of my life is not only just being, having the critics out there or or like you literally just always being critiqued, but it's the time that the fans and the viewers don't see of what we do. And what I mean by that is, you know, there's a lot of downtime when we're auditioning and we're taking meetings and we're getting called back and we're doing chemistry tests and we're testing with other actors and then we don't get it, you know? I mean, I always joke if I got paid for every audition that I have done, I would be retired by now. You know what I mean? Literally. We don't get paid to audition. And so a lot of that disappointment, a lot of that letdown is what initially really like, I had to learn how to cope with that. People just see kind of what we do and like, oh, he's on this show, he's on that show. Wow. Right. But they don't see the downtime and that, the payoff is to work in front of a camera. Right. Um, and in doing that, I came from such a structured foundational background, meaning, I was an academic, I was an athlete, and, what I do today is going to affect me tomorrow, literally. You know what I mean? We have a game on Saturday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we're going hard. Thursday is more of a light day, and Friday's a walkthrough. And then, we play on Saturday, win or lose. Then we start it again, on Monday. Same with like, being a student. You have midterms, you have finals, and then you graduate to the next grade or whatever that is, right? In this business, that doesn't happen as chronologically as that. There's a lot of ups and downs, highs and really low lows. And so what I've done, throughout my career is I've had to really focus on me as far as giving myself a schedule, you know, taking that control, finding the control in the things that I can control. That may sound really simple to people, but you know, I hate it when I'm at the beckon of a studio and they're going to determine the next 4 years of my life, whether it's a yes or a no. If it's a yes, then okay, now we're in. Now that, I have to work on this show. Or it's a no, it's a huge loss, it's a huge defeat, it's a huge confidence downer, right? So, what can I do every day that I feel A, productive, B, in control? And that's just creating a schedule. And that's where actually I'm very fortunate to have this athletic background where I've always physically trained for something, you know, and whether it's off season or in season, you got to get those workouts in, you got to study those tapes, you got to get better. And I've really applied my athleticism and my athletic background to my current career, meaning I get up at a certain time, I'm eating this at a certain time, I'm doing my cardio at a certain time, I'm doing my weights at a certain time, I'm then eating again at a certain time, and then I leave a certain amount of time to then, prep for an audition or a project, work with my coach, work with my team, take meetings for other stuff, doing press. It's all a schedule every day so that if I do have a job, then it's kind of like, okay, now we got booked. So now we have to rearrange that,
Right.
and that's the only way because otherwise we have no schedule. Literally, we're just waiting to audition and to hopefully book. You know what I mean? And then once we book, it's like, okay, now we got to get ready. That's why, there's that, cliche saying where if you stay ready, you don't need to get ready. Right. And literally, that's something that I believe in, and in doing that allows me mentally to know like today I worked out, today I ate good, I was disciplined in my diet, and three, I just submitted 2 auditions. There is nothing more I could have done today. You know what I mean? And I try to create that 9 to 5 Monday through Friday work schedule in that capacity where weekends are off, but there's residual, rollover, and maybe I can do this Saturday. So, mental health, honestly, it's a huge part of what we do, and I'm that's really fortunate to have the background that I have coming into this industry because it's kind of frightening to think about what if I didn't, you know. there's a lot of downtime, if you don't structure your life right here. And I've learned that going through this process. And so, when I get the question or the issue of mental health comes up, I really focus on physical health because that's something that each and every one of us can do. We can do that, whether it's going for a walk or going to the gym or just our diets, our health, supplement taking, whatever it is, you're in control of that. And I found that once I can control certain things, it allows me to calm down and allows me to be able to focus clearer.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
kind
No,
of a long answer, but
no, that's great. People need to hear that. People need to hear that there are,
yeah,
especially veterans out there. We get out of the service, and you a loss of self and loss of service and all these things. And being active is a great way. I always
yeah,
tell people, be of service, right? Do volunteer somewhere. Get out there, be
yeah.
active. It's all helpful. I got a couple more questions for you, and then we'll let you go. I know you're a busy guy, and I don't want to break
Cool.
your schedule. I don't want
Good.
to knock you over. A great question came in that said basically, we see a little bit of the DC, we see a little bit of your nerd stuff. If if you got offered and they said, "Hey, we want you to join the Marvel universe, the big MCU, the big time,"
Yeah.
and you could pick whichever character you'd be interested in playing, who would be the first one you'd jump at?
You know what? I wanted to be Shang-Chi. You know what I mean? Um, Funny enough, though, when I actually did audition for that role, and funny enough, I just knew the character so well that I knew that it wasn't a good fit for me, to be honest. And
Mm,
so, uh, people ask me DC or Marvel, and at the end of the day, there's no discrimination. It's truly based on the character. So now, my team and I, we discuss this a lot actually, because things come in and offers come in and, opportunities are there. And we're being really picky right now, as far as, kind of which universe we want to go into. Right. But there are some opportunities out there currently, which, that's all I can say about it. But,
right, right.
with Shang-Chi 2, being announced, as well as some other DC stuff. Hopefully we're gonna land something in one of those,
Yeah,
but it's it's like this: if the character's right and I feel 100% comfortable with it, you know, whether it's a villain or a hero, like I'm all in. You know what I mean? So those are two things on the bucket list. I mean, even though I've been able to play Metallo in the DC world, Marvel's always been, in the forefront
of
just
course.
because I love that stuff. You know what I mean? And the fan base is tremendous and the love I've gotten for just being a small part in the DC world, I can only imagine, and to have that opportunity would be epic. So
Sure.
can't really put it out there exactly what character
Right.
though.
No, of course. No, of course. Of course. Of course. We're rooting for you. We're rooting for you. We want to see you out there.
Yeah.
So I knew him when, uh,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly.
being that you've gotten to dabble into the being the hero and that you've gotten to dabble into being the villain, do you find one more creatively challenging? Do you find one more that you like to sink your teeth into more? I mean, where does the joy for you come in more than the other?
You know what? Geez, another great question. I actually it every character I play, my goal is always to bring that realism to the camera. I never want, great act. They always say great acting is not acting, right? And so, there hasn't been one character yet where it fully represents like Rich Ting. You know what I mean? But every character, whether it's me playing a Japanese general on High Castle or Bolo in Warrior or even Metallo, there is always, a sprinkle of me, of the real me in those characters that I bring, just because I need to bring that behavior so you believe it,
Mm,
right? So whether it's a villain, I mean, or a hero, I mean, I've, this is where people always bring up my background, being an athlete and going to the schools and having the educational background that I have. They always ask, like, why'd you do all that? That's a waste if you're doing. And this is where it's not, because I get to pull. There's what people see is not exactly what you get with me. And of course, everyone sees me or knows me through these characters. But at the same time, I've had the opportunity to have gone through a lot in my life. As a kid, hardships, as far as obstacles and whatnot, tragedy, you know what I mean, and all that stuff gets to come out, and when I get to play these certain parts, and so um, I don't know. I can't answer that question. Like, it's not a black and white question.
Sure.
Is what I'm trying to say. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But yeah, I'm able to just pull things from my past and present to, like I said, to make it real. You
No,
know what I
I
mean?
like that. I definitely like that, and I think too that when you're playing these characters, let me ask you this: do you play them like so the role of a villain, let's say like
Mhm.
Metallo, do you bring it to like where okay, he doesn't think he's the bad guy. So I'm not going to play him like this mustache twirling
Yeah,
evildoer, right? He's just a
yeah.
guy in this situation and I'm going to believe that he thinks he's right. Is that what you try to bring to it?
Totally. I think the word that I always bring, creatively is loyal. That's why people are like, "Oh, you're the bad guy." I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm the loyal guy to that guy, and maybe that guy's a bad guy, but I'm not a bad guy." You know what I mean? And so, I just, it's that sense of belief, knowing that what you're doing is what you think is right, and you're loyal to your cause. And perfect example is like Bolo. People are like, I love it when people are like, he's not a bad guy. I'm like, no, he's not. He's really not. He just has a certain demeanor and a certain aura that maybe you would think he's up to something that's not
Mm.
good, or maybe he's such a violent person, with him carrying out his task. But I always, reword and say he's loyal to his gang. He's loyal to his tong, because he has to carry out these tasks in order to survive. So, it's like anyone else. It's like a dad protecting their kid. They're not a bad guy, but if you're doing it in with good intention, you know what I mean, to protect your kid. So I use that word, loyal. I'm always loyal.
I like that. I like that loyal. That's awesome. All right, let me ask you this last one. You know, however far, however long you do this for, when
Mhm.
when you hang up the boots, so to speak, what do you want your legacy to be in the entertainment industry?
Oh, that's easy. I think 100%. The first Asian American leading man, whether that's in the DC world, that's in the Marvel world. I think I don't really touch on my race or my ethnicity too much, but because I'm an American. That's how I identify myself, and that's how it's always been. But once you get in this industry, people look at you and they go, "Oh, you're Asian. Do you speak Chinese? Do you speak Japanese?" And I've actually had to learn a lot of these languages because of this image that Hollywood traditionally has for Asian Americans. And so growing up, I never saw that guy. I never had an Asian American hero or Asian American actor that I looked up to, especially as a kid, that I was like, I want to, that's cool. That's the guy, whether it's good or bad character. Right. And so for me, it's always been to leave this industry being one of the pioneers of the game, being because just also time wise, like there aren't a lot of fourth generation, third generation Asian American actors that are doing work right now. A lot of this is, I know this because that's who I am, right? But a lot of my fellow actors, they may be from other countries. Just because they speak English doesn't mean they're Asian American. You know what I
Right.
mean? There's a lot of transplants, people from Asia, people from Europe, people from Australia that are Asian, people from Canada even,
Sure.
that are second generation, but they're not Asian American. You see what I'm saying? So, and in our world, as Asian American actors in Hollywood, there's a few of us, you know, and my goal is to represent an Asian American leading man on all platforms, on all areas of this spectrum. And so far, I've played villain, I've played hero, I've played a gay character, I've played a detective, I've played a lawyer, and all these things. And that's kind of what I want to continue to do, where whether you're a kid watching this show and you're like, oh my God, that's Metallo. Like, he's like me, like I'm Asian American, like I could be Metallo, or you're watching another show like Warrior and you're like, oh my God, like I totally identify with this character as a strong character. Or you're just, I could be dad. You know what I mean? just I'm a dad, and some other kids like, oh yeah, like there is an Asian American dad. Because all of these guys that I've been able to play already in my my young career is what I like to say in Hollywood. I never saw. So to me, I'm living that dream already, and I just want to continue the momentum. I want to continue the representation, and I just want to continue being positive, for anyone, kids to adults, US, outside the country, foreign, whatever, you know what I mean? So,
It's awesome.
I mean, hopefully that happens, you know what I'm saying? I think I'm on the right path. So I just got to keep the momentum going.
No, I'm excited. I'm excited to see where you go. So, with that in mind, do you have anything coming up that you want people to check you out? Do you want to shout out to anything that's out there, or just let people know where they can find you?
Yeah. Well, first, I'm available on all social media platforms at Rich Ting World. And as far as upcoming project, just because of the whole COVID thing, a lot of things got delayed. A lot of things got rushed. But currently, a lot of things came out just because of the whole, like I said, the whole pandemic situation, right? So currently, right now on Tubi, I have a horror film called Unborn, where I play one of the lead characters as a detective. Um, Magnum PI on CBS. We just finished season 4. I was able to do a recurring arc as one of the Yakuza characters on that thing, which was fun. Um, I did a spaghetti western over the pandemic called No Name and Dynamite, which is now available on Amazon Prime, iTunes, and is on I think demand. And that was very interesting because we kept the genre of a true spaghetti western, and we shot it actually pre-pandemic and during the pandemic in the LA area, outside of LA. But the way we shot it looks like it's from the 60s. You know what I mean? Except you have an Asian American cowboy, which no one's really ever seen before. So
Right.
that was definitely one that's out now. And then coming up, like you teased in the beginning, we just finished season 1 of Netflix's Partner Track, which is a legal drama, which is going to be on the Netflix platform hopefully this fall. And this summer, we have Hulu's The Old Man, starring Jeff Bridges, which actually should have came out a year ago. And they had to delay it just due to COVID and some other reasons, but we're finally going to get that going. And yeah, man, just really excited, with these recurrings to hopefully come back for these new seasons. And again, for us, it's only March. It's almost April, so it's still early in the year for us. So
Right.
looking forward to just, hopefully getting into some more DC stuff, some Marvel stuff, and coming back on this thing and talking to you about that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You're a friend of the show forever now. Anytime you want to come
I
back,
appreciate that. I
you're
appreciate it.
you got our contact, man. Anytime you want to come on, we can talk some geek stuff and some nerd stuff and
Yeah, yeah.
just dive into the pool of acting and talk about that. But I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. I'll give you the last 5 seconds to say goodbye to the audience. Really enjoyed it. They've been chatting away in the chat, so they've really enjoyed everything you said, and we'll toss it to a break.
Okay, I appreciate you guys having me. To all the men and women in our U.S. Armed Services and all branches, I just want to say thank you. I've always appreciated what you guys and gals have done for us, and much respect and love.
Awesome, guys. This has been Rich Ting. Check him out everywhere. We'll post his social medias on there, and we'll be back right after this.